Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. We welcome you to the Recovery Toolkit podcast, which is brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation. I'm Richie and I'm the host. And today I'm going to be joined by Steve Ramsey. Steve is somebody who's quite important in getting the foundation set up. And it's great to have him on the podcast. Steve, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Rich. I'm from Newcastle. I spent quite a lot of my time away. So I moved down to London at 18, then from London to the Midlands. I guess that's where my gambling escalated to something completely different than anything that had gone before, which ultimately led me to the foundation.
Yeah, I think we've all got a kind of a story, haven't we, of what went on in our lives that took us to the point where we decided enough was enough. And I think that's what I want to focus on this podcast, is focusing on the bit where we get to recovery, basically. Yeah. And can you tell us how you entered recovery? Like, what were them last few days of gambling and what went on in your life?
It's probably an incredible sort of 72 hours. It started off with going to a good friend's funeral. Dave, who was a great bloke. He'd been a fireman most of his life. We called him Dave the Fire. He was a bit of a boring twat. He would tell a story about anything and everything. But he was such a kind and nice bloke. In sitting at the funeral, his brother, who I'd never met, came and spoke, and he did the eulogy. And he told not just sort of me, but the whole room, some of the stuff that Dave had done that no one knew about. I won't go into massive detail on some of it, but he sponsored this kid that had lost people in a fire. Sponsored him into university and stuff. And it was just stuff like that. And I was sitting there with so much going on in my head that not one person knew about. And I was sort of sitting there thinking, if this was my funeral, people would be saying, Steve's a great bloke, we all, it's such good fun. And I was just sitting there feeling like a complete nutter, like fraud. That's a big word that will come into it. But it did something to my mind that made me realise I had to stop what was going on. And one of those solutions was suicide. Right? It is something I'd been thinking about, and those thoughts got bigger and stronger and more detailed and planned. So the next day I found myself on a beach just outside Skegness, and it was a happy place. Somewhere I'd gone when the kids were young. And I went that day to figure out if I could kill myself. That was the first question. And it took me a couple of hours to think, yes, I could do it. And I picked the sea because I thought I can just swim out and keep going and just keep going until
you can't swim.
Yeah. And it was a great way where it wouldn't impact anyone, So once I sort of decided, yes, I can do it, the next question was, are you going to? And I'd love to have been able to see what I looked like that day, because it was a glorious day. It was lovely and sunny. There was quite a lot of people about. And I was just sat in trousers and a shirt and probably a tie because, I should have been at work. And sitting there thinking, am I just going to go out and swim? And basically what happened was a family came and sat next to me, and it was just a mum, dad, 2 girls about the same age as Jess and Em had been. And I just sat and watched them, and I just thought, nah, can't do this. So I literally left, got in the car, went back, sent a couple of emails from work, which would incriminate myself on what I'd been doing. I then drove up to Newcastle to see, to visit my mum, to tell my mum what was about to go and do. But because I hardly ever got in touch and isolated myself from them a bit, I got there and she wasn't there. She'd gone across to Ireland. So basically, I just spent a couple of days with my brothers and sisters, going out, having a great time. Didn't tell anybody anything. Then went back to work, was called straight into the office, and just said the words, I've been stealing because I've got a massive gambling problem.
What was it like when you said that?
It was just such a relief to get it out. So I know there was loads of shit going to happen and stuff because of what I just said. But I just felt so much, a huge weight. It's like a cliche, but a huge weight had gone off my shoulders. And sort of work sort of said, well, we're going to have to investigate it. We're going to have to suspend you. And they literally escorted me off the premises. My boss did that. And she said to me, Steve, don't worry about it. We'll sort it out. And I think that might have been something I didn't want to hear. Like, I need the consequences of this, I mean, I didn't have a clue how much I'd stolen, for how long, but I knew it was going to be considerable. So I literally went from there to the police station and just said, I need to report a crime. And looking back now on all of this, I was in a complete and utter mental breakdown, probably. Yeah. And it just felt the right thing to do. So I refused legal assistance, and I just needed to get this off my chest. And it took a quite long time for the police to believe me. And well, they thought I was trying to cover for somebody else, something else. I got so angry at them. But eventually they just realized. I think one of them went off and spoke to work. So after that was then, again, some really difficult times where I went straight and told my partner at the time, and from there told the kids. I knew pretty quick that it was finished with me and my partner back then. And I then got in the car and headed back up to Newcastle and started to tell the family. But that's also when I started to get my first sort of help where...
What was that, Steve? Where was the first place you went for help?
Well, the first thing I did was actually go and see my now brother-in-law, Tony. Tony, I knew, had worked in the NHS for all of his life. He was retired. And I knew he worked in the mental health side of it. But I didn't realise most of it was based on addiction. And he'd worked in mental health, prisons, all sorts of places. So I sort of give a massive outpouring to him of stuff. And he said, Steve, write some of this down and then look for what you can do something about. So a lot of it was stuff that was completely out of my control, what work was going to do, what the police were going to do. And it was a great way to sort of shut that off and then concentrate on the stuff that I needed to do.
And was that when you stopped gambling, Steve? Was that the moment?
So
you've never had a bet since then?
No. So it was, my last bet, would you believe, was getting rid of one of my free bets. And it still amazes me to this day. It was 50 quid, and I just found the first horse race and stuck it on the horse that was like 150 to 1. I'm so surprised it didn't win. But it didn't, and that was my last bet, and that was the 3rd of July, 2017. But also it's when somebody told me about a Gamblers Anonymous meeting in Newcastle. So I bowled up there. It wasn't, I hadn't been forced into it, I chose to go. And yeah, it was just the start of something I still go to now. I don't go every week. Back then, I did Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday every week.
And that's still part of your life now,
yes.
You're saying, yeah?
Yeah. So I just do the Monday now. You tend to, for me, after a period, I picked the one that I was most comfortable and happy with. That's not to say the Tuesday and Thursday didn't do me any good. They did massive good at the time. And it really helped me figure out the tools to stop gambling. So all the self-exclusions, Gamban, Gamstop, excluding from bookies, Moses, all of those things I just did. Even though I didn't really gamble so much on some of it, they told me it's what I needed to do.
And at that time, Steve, is this where you're waiting to hear from the police and still getting investigation at work and all that sort of stuff? How long did that go on for?
I went down a number of times to work, to the big head office in Warwick, and sat in. Obviously, I'd give complete access to the police, to everything. It wasn't a complex thing. It wasn't something, it wasn't how they didn't pick it up sooner at work. Is it, I still wonder about that. But I sort of helped work calculate exactly how much it was. It was quite a big blow to me because I'd been saying to everybody, I hope it's around the sort of 60, 80,000. And as we were going, calculating it and going through it and agreeing all of this, the times that I took money, it was like 50,000, up to 60, then to 70, then to 80. And I was thinking, oh, shite, there's like another 2 years to go. And it escalated massively in the last sort of 12 months. So the figure was 192,000, just under.
And so, I think a lot of people focus on money, don't they? Like a number. Through that period, what else did you lose through that period? So from handing yourself into police, you're now getting investigated. You've obviously calculated the sum, but what else had gone for Steve in that period? Because I think this is the bit not many people want to talk about or focus on.
Yeah, it did annoy me. A lot of people just wanted that headline. How much did you steal? You have to remember how much of my own money went before that. The first time I stole it was because I was in desperate debt because I'd literally spent everything and all my wages would be spent as soon as I got it. But, that's not the thing that has done the damage to me. Yes, I have debts. Yes, I've got to repay it. Yes, it's going to take a long time. But it's all the other things. Where do I start? Mentally, mental health mine was just shocking. But it was invisible to other people. It was just me that would wake up every day thinking, is this the day you get caught? But also, your family that's really close to you, you have less and less contact with them in case they spot something.
Yeah.
Work, I was pretty driven at work and could be relied upon, and was well liked and well thought of. So all of this that you're putting up with every day, it's the mental health side of it that really suffered.
And when you handed yourself in, Steve, was there any support?
No. I would like to think, looking back, that it should have been spotted at the police station that actually this bloke is not fit for an interview. He needs to get some help. And then when we were done and everything was finished and I was charged, they just kicked me out. No, they didn't kick me out. They took me home. They drove me home. But that was it. I did not have any other involvement with the police at any time other than that interview.
And then if we were to move on, through your journey of abstinence, let's call it, because I know we've spoke a few times and you said, from that moment, I didn't gamble, but I didn't really enter recovery. And then obviously went into jail. You got sentenced. Yeah. How long did you get sentenced for?
So it was 27 months sentence, which I was happy with. It could have been more. But I think leading up to jail, all I had really done was just stop gambling. And that wasn't as hard as it is for some people. I know that. And it's just I had completely had enough of it. And I knew the damage just one more bet could do. So I was 100% focused on not having that first bet. But that's all I did. It was a pretty awful time, really, because it was difficult to think, well, I'll go out and get a job. And then how do you explain that? Well, actually, at some point, I'm not going to be around.
And then you went into jail, Steve.
Yeah.
And you mentioned to me during that sentence you were allowed at some point to go to a GA meeting in Middlesbrough. And that's kind of where your recovery started. Is that right? As in looking at yourself and doing work on yourself?
Yeah. There's two things that happened in prison that are of big importance. Now, forget the prison environment and all that comes with it. It's impossible to describe how hellish it can be. But you get through it. But when I was at Kirk Leamington, I was still in the main block, so it was probably, I'd been inside for about 4 months. And part of what needed to happen was proceeds of crime, poker. So obviously I stole money, it needs to be paid back. They took some money off me, they confiscated pensions and things like that, but there was still a big lump sum outstanding. But they could see that it's not like I was stealing to have a lavish lifestyle. Literally, it just went from my account into a bank account, into a gambling account and into their pockets. So we had sort of reached the agreement of what they call a confiscation side of it. And then I just pay £1. And this has to be done at court with a judge. And it basically says that you haven't got the funds now, but if in future you get them, you've got to pay this back. So I knew this was going through, and I'd signed some paperwork, and I was just waiting for the court date for that to happen. I got notified that I had something from my solicitor, which was a change to the pocket. And basically it showed that a lump sum had been paid to my employer by one of the operators, the gambling operators. And I was furious about that. So I wrote to them to find out what the hell it was all about. So that was the start of something, because they responded to say, the operator should have done this. They didn't. They're not allowed to benefit from proceeds of crime. Therefore, they sent that to your employer. This is something we did with the Gambling Commission, who I'd never heard of. This is the last correspondence we're having with you. If you need information, speak to the Gambling Commission. So my next letter was to them. And you have to realise this is over a period of time. Yeah. And as I progressed through the system in prison, it was an open prison, so I was then able to go and get licenses to go out of prison. And that's when I fought with a good friend of ours, Joe Clarkson, to get out to a JA meeting. There was one in Middlesbrough, which was about 8 miles from Kirk Leamington, and we managed to be able to go out on a Monday night, and that was the second big thing. In the Newcastle meetings, we tend not to look at the books or do the steps. It's like quite informal. Whereas I walked into Middlesbrough, and the first meeting I went to, they do a steps meeting every month. So January, step 1, Feb, step 2. I think it was step 8 in August. And basically, they just read the step out, and then it was a big meeting. There was 25, 30 people there quite often. And they just went around the room, and people talked about what that step meant to them. And it really opened my eyes to something that I hadn't seen. And it was then that I started to say, oh my God, I need to look at this. I haven't done any of this. So yes, I hadn't had a bet for over a year by then. But it was like I was still Steve, the same person in a way that I was when I was gambling. And that was the start of me realising that I need to work on me.
Yeah, and that's the thing I love about the steps. The steps was something that I'd done in my early recovery. I think it's important that you have a program. You know, you're trying to work to a program, and through the different steps that you do, you find out a lot about yourself. And for me, self-awareness is so important. And it sounds like that was the start of Steve becoming aware of the work that needs to be done.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, and it really hit home that. Yes, I hadn't had a bet, but I hadn't really done any work on recovery. So it was extremely difficult at first because, you know, you have to be really open and honest about it.
I think at this point is where you have to take responsibility, isn't it? At that point, you have to look at yourself and go, what's in my control? What can I do to give myself a better chance?
Yeah.
And that's hard, isn't it?
Of course, I never look back and sort of think, if only I'd done this earlier, if only I'd done this earlier. I don't think I would have been ready because of some of the stuff that was happening. You know, prison was ahead. So it was impossible really to focus on anything other than that. People may not know that when I first went to that GA meeting, you were in the room. Yeah. But all I did really was turn up and say, you know, oh, yeah, I'm in trouble and I need help. And I don't know what I looked like to you, Richie, then, but I look back and I think most of the time I was probably half pissed because I know, looking back, that alcohol was a great way to escape from all the shit that was like happening and gonna happen. So
I was probably worse, Steve. I probably had more than alcohol when I was in that meeting. You know, we did meet in Gamblers Anonymous at that time, didn't we? And I was abstinent from gambling, but I wasn't abstinent from anything else in my life. You know, I was massively drinking as well, using drugs nearly every day, but I didn't realise that was a problem at that time. But
I think what it sort of made me realise is, and I will never call GA. It's been such a part of my life. It still is. But it wasn't giving me enough. And I couldn't find what I was looking for. Yeah. So as a result of also the poker thing, I was really curious and like, what the hell has happened? How has this happened? How has it been allowed to happen? So as well as looking at myself, I was looking at all the other things involved. So I'd written to the Gambling Commission. I'd received a response from them with all sorts of like paperwork and regulations and rules. Also, it was approaching time for me to get out. You know, it was a 27-month sentence, but with the way it is, you serve half a sentence, but also I was entitled to a tag, so I only served about just under a year inside. So it was approaching release time. It gave me something to really focus on because I was scared shitless of getting out in a way, although, you know, from the minute you get in, all you want is to get out. But the fear of getting out was like, that was it was a really, something that really took up my mind. What the hell am I going to do and how?
Obviously, I never went to prison, but the only thing I can relate to is I went to rehab and I spent time in rehab, so I'm in a bubble, you know, and I think that's what you're trying to describe. It was a bit of a bubble you were in, and there was only so much you could do whilst you were in there. But then when you come back to normal life, whatever normal life is meant to be, at that point, you're just clueless, scared.
Yeah. I mean, the way open prisons work, I was entitled to then day release and then weekend release. So it's a way of sort of gradually building you back to being released.
So how long have you been out of jail now, Steve?
Crikey,
5 years? Or 4 years? 4.5 years?
Let me think about this. 4 and a bit years.
4 and a bit, yeah. So since you got out, let's talk about the journey that you've been on since you got out of prison. And how did you get involved in the foundation? Because I think that's a bit of a remarkable story in itself.
Okay, so one of the important things for me was finding work. That was a real struggle because I was sort of going for work that I'd done in the past, which was, you know, finance, accountancy stuff. But I had this fraud conviction. So I was going for sort of office-based jobs at a lower level than I'd been in my career, I guess. And it was just like hellish. But also behind all of this, I was still getting involved in the space and starting to get to know people. An example, a mate of mine works for one of the operators. He told me about a bloke called Paul Buck, who he'd been with at work that day in Newcastle. And he said this guy had had a similar situation where he had decent work and stole a load of money, ended up in jail, and now he started this business. And that was the first time I'd heard of Paul Bick's book or Epic Risk Management. But I did get in touch with him, and I'd done that with so many other people in the space. It was just, do you mind if I can have a chat about what it is you're doing? And Paul kindly agreed to come and meet me. He said, I'm up in Newcastle again in a few weeks. I'd warned him that I was on tag, so we had a very narrow window. And I met at the Gosford Park Hotel next to the race course.
Ironic.
And again, I'm not sure what Paul saw that night. But what he said to me was really important. He said, look, Steve, just keep doing what you do and learn, and opportunities will come your way and you'll find the one that suits you. Because by then I knew it was something I wanted to do massively. I wanted to be involved to raise the awareness of what gambling can do to some people.
And then I'm guessing that became a big part of your recovery as well as just your life at that time.
Yeah, because I started to meet more and more people. And that connection you get from people who have gone through it. And they know how you feel sometimes, and they know the damage that's been done. So it was a brand new sort of network of people that helped support me. So I still went to GA and I still got everything that gave me. But this part of it was the part that was starting to get my confidence back, get that self-worth back, start to believe and hope that actually something is ahead and I'm not going to be a waste of time.
And you haven't been, Steve. Like, I can honestly sit here now and say you've been a massive part of my recovery, but actually you've been part of pretty much anybody that works in this space will know who you are because of the impact you've had. And I think you've got to give yourself a pat on the back for that, because it was your determination and drive that actually made you go out and do that. And off the back of that, we've had lots of conversations, but we're both now involved in the foundation. And I think, you underestimate the impact you've had on people's lives. And I say this to every person I meet, you're the most empathetic man I've ever met in my life because you have that understanding. And I think that's really, really a gift that, this whole journey's give you. And out of all of that struggle has been the opportunity to now do what you're doing and be who you are. And I think that's really important for you to recognise, because everybody else I speak to does.
I will say thank you, Richie. Brad Waldron taught me to do that because inside I still cringe.
And that's why I've said it, because I know you will be cringing,
yeah.
But I think it's important for you to hear.
But also it's really important, Richie, because that is a massive part of my recovery now. And it's a massive part of me staying well.
So something I'm going to ask everybody on this podcast, Steve, is what are the 3 to 5 things that are in your recovery toolkit? So 3 to 5 things that you've got in your life now that are part of your recovery that keep you on track and keep you well. What would you say they are?
Well, I've mentioned, GA, huge part of it.
And that's what these coins are that you've
yes,
got sat here?
Yeah. So Laura kindly gave me this at Christmas. So I've had these coins lying around, always close by, because they do mean a lot. And Laura kindly put this into a frame and give it to me at Christmas. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes. And it's hard to describe the feeling I get from that, because what people may not know is like the heartache that is in that room at times, and how low people can be, in the fact that you have a room full of people that will try and pick these people up. It's a huge part. Obviously, the foundation is a massive part. When Paul Buck came to me and said, I've got this idea of the foundation, when he showed me a PowerPoint of some of his thoughts, and it massively hit home as something that was massively missing in my recovery. So to be asked to get involved in helping them is this a thing possible, was so important. And of course that then led to joining the foundation from the start, like you. And it's so easy to give everything to something you really, really love, because you know how much it means to people. But also you know how much benefit they're going to get from it. So, I'm privileged.
Yeah, you've got a few other things on the table here, Stephen. I'm guessing these are part of your recovery as well?
Yeah, so, it's just little things. And this is my recovery. I work very hard to remind myself that I am worth it, that, I should have confidence. I should have good self-worth, because
I do have confidence. I do have self-worth too.
I do. But these little things are, when my mind is telling me that I don't, these are the things I look at. Yeah. You've seen these.
Yeah.
We get given these at one of our events. I have shown courage. Yeah. And I need to remember that, because the guilt of some of the stuff that I've done can overpower. Right? And it's the little things, the little reminders, the compass, find your true north, find your direction. The journal, it took me how long, Richie?
A good year, I think.
A year and a half before my mind would allow me to see this as something that's really going to work. Because up to then, I wasn't ready. And that's a great point about recovery. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Some people are so different. Some people will embrace everything and go for it full pelt. Others get lost. And, it's so important that people see that there's so many different things you can be doing to help you with your recovery that are enjoyable. So recovery is not a grind. It's something, but it does require work.
I think that's something that's really important for us at the foundation as well, isn't it? I think we talk about a lot of multiple pathways to recovery and not one size fits all, and we don't ever try to be that everything to everybody. We signpost and refer a lot of people into other organisations where they can get additional support and stuff. So I think it is important that that's the message that we give on this podcast and in our foundation, is there is multiple pathways, and try different stuff.
And how many people say, "Oh, GA hated it"?
Yeah. Me.
Yeah, exactly. You went and found other things. Yeah. You can't, unless you try it, you don't know if it's going to work. Right? Yeah. If it doesn't work, leave it. Go and find something else that does. So I'm a great believer in, if somebody comes to me and they perhaps don't understand the foundation, not ready for the foundation, I will happily send them somewhere that will really benefit them at that time, in the hope at some point they may come back to us. But if they don't, that's fair enough, because they've found something that works. Obviously, I would recommend the foundation to anybody in recovery.
Give it a try.
Give it a try, because it may enhance your recovery. It may sustain that recovery. It may make it interesting. You may find more people that you enjoy being with. So it's a huge part of my recovery.
Brilliant. Steve, we're coming to the end now, so I just want to thank you for being so open and honest. And if I'm honest, there's a few times that you touched my heart and I had to hold back the tears a little bit, but we got there in the end. So Thank you for sharing vulnerably and being so open and honest. And hopefully people who've been listening or watching get something from it. And if people do want to reach out to Steve, then in the show notes and stuff, we'll put ways of getting in contact with Steve or ways of getting in touch with the foundation. So thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure to sit here and speak to you.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, mate.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.